And welcome and good evening. For those of you that don't know me and who we haven't met before, my name is Gareth Penn and I'm the Registrar of the Hairdressing Council. And I'm really pleased to be able to hold this session this evening because with the new government coming in, there's a huge amount of rumour and a huge amount of misinformation that is really proving unhelpful for those trying to run a business. So we've got a few slides to go through, and throughout those, if you've got any queries or questions, if you want to just pop them up in the chat function, I'll be looking at that as well whilst we're going, and we'll then try and answer your questions as we're going. If we don't manage to get through them all, I will come back to you with your question after the event, and we'll have loads of time for questions at the end as well. So I'll just share my screen and hopefully that'll work. Just one moment. So just going to pause because Colette wants me to resend the link. This is the wonder of technology. So just give me 2 seconds because I'm really keen that Colette is able to join us this evening, if at all possible. So I'm just hopefully going to send her the link. So just bear with me for just 2 seconds. Right, sorry about that. I think the best thing to do is for me to push on and for Colette to join as and when she can. So let me get back to the presentation. Here we go. So hopefully you can all see the full screen of the presentation. So a couple of intros about the British Hair Consortium. So if you aren't sure what the British Hair Consortium is, this is a really exciting development where the largest number of the key players in our industry have come together for the first time ever. So you've got, and this is in no particular order, the Hairdressing Council, the Freelance Hairdressers Association, the Salon Employers Association, the Fellowship for British Hairdressing, the Good Salon Guide, and the Men's Fed have all come together. Now, we invited all other trade bodies as well, and they decided for whatever reason not to join us. However, what this means, for the first time ever, the British Hair Consortium has got everybody together, and we're able then to speak to government, to different departments, about, with one voice, about the really important things that are impacting our sector and are impacting you and your business. So all of those organisations, as I say, are part of this, and it's nice to see some of the other principals of those organisations with us this evening. So, what are our objectives this evening in the hour? So, this is about informing you of the proposed changes that the new Labour government have talked about. Now, it's really important that I am clear here that much of this information is based on an announcement by government, and there is not much detail. Any organisation that comes out and says categorically X or Y is, I think, not terribly helpful. What we need is clarity, and there's a lot of information here that we will need to cover off again in the future. So we're going to inform you of the proposed changes. We're going to identify how this may impact your business, whatever your business structure, whether you're an employer, whether you're self-employed, however that works in your business. And we're then also going to look at if there are any ways that we think you might be able to mitigate these changes. That won't always be the case. So first of all, and I hope Colette's just managed to join us. Colette, are you able to, hope in the first instance, hear me, and then secondly, hopefully join in with the conversation? The stunned silence from Colette suggests that that isn't working. Colette, can you hear us, and can we hear you? No. How frustrating. One last try. Colette, can you hear us? Can we hear you? No. Never mind. We'll keep going. So the employment status and worker contracts. The new government have made 3 announcements on this section. So firstly, they're going to introduce a single worker status subject to consultation. Secondly, the removal of 0 hours contract workers. And thirdly, new self-employment rights. And we're going to just, on the next slide, look at the detail of each of these, because depending on the way you set your sound.
Can't hear a thing.
Oh, I can hear you, Colette. If Colette can't hear me, it would be helpful, because of course I could be talking to myself. Can somebody just pop in a chat that you guys can hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Scott. At least I know I'm not just talking to myself, although often those are the best conversations, aren't they? Thank you also, Heather and Tony. Right. Yeah, I did. We can. I don't know if you can hear us, Colette, but we could definitely hear you. So if you want to say something, just dive in. Okay, so the single worker status, and again, this is all subject to consultation. There is not a lot of detail being announced on this. A single worker status is really significant, because that means that all workers would have the full range of employment protection, including unfair dismissal. Now, we don't know the detail of what this means, because there's not been any details. So that may relate to self-employed workers, that may only relate to employed workers. Our understanding is that this really will be aimed at those that are self-employed. So will really impact how the engagers, so the engager would be the person whose name is above the door of the salon, who is the person who is renting that space to the self-employed worker. So it really will, we believe, impact them. So if you rent chairs, if you rent space, if you have one of these like a collective where everybody comes to work, this is really coming down and looking at how the employment status is calculated. Now, at first glance, this, you might think, oh, this is pretty heavy, this is pretty bad. But actually, this, if done right, may well help provide a much better level playing field, because we all know now that because of the very high costs of things like VAT, very high costs of employing somebody, PAYE, pensions, and so on, that actually it can be for many a more cost-effective, more profitable route to make their staff self-employed. So if done right, this could be a good thing for the high street salon, because it will stop the around the fringes where things aren't being done properly. But there's no detail. Okay, the next one we talked about was 0 hours workers. So just to be clear, what a 0 hour contract is where you have somebody who has an employment contract, but it doesn't specify how many hours they are going to work in a given week or month. And these can be really useful for an employer because they can provide flexibility, particularly in busier times. However, they've been abused by, not in our sector actually, abused by people taking advantage of workers and not giving them consistent hours or telling them when they're going to be able to come into work. Personally, I can't see how they can ban 0 hour hours contracts entirely. We will need to look at the detail of this. Yeah, absolutely, Paul. We can get this emailed out to everybody, the full slides. I don't know whether we're having some sound issues with some people, but yeah, absolutely, we can get the recording sent out, not a problem at all. 0 hours workers, 0 hours contracts, it's not illegal. It's not really even, there's nothing really terribly wrong with it. So we will need to see how that looks in the end. So new self-employment rights, this kind of bounces back to the first point. I don't understand how this can work in practice, because how will someone self-employed be given and have a right to a contract? Again, we need some detail on this, and it is exactly as you say, Paul, potentially a really worrying time around a lot of this. And the absolute reason why we're holding this session this evening is to try and remove some of that worry, because there is very little detail on all of this. And we still have an opportunity with the consultation that follows all announcements and before things are made law. We absolutely have an opportunity to lobby government in all the departments and saying, you need to understand the impact on our industry, and you need to understand the impact on an industry that is already struggling a great deal post-COVID. So this enforcement of worker rights, this is actually, I think, a really, pretty powerful body that they're talking about setting up. And the single enforcement body makes it easier for workers to enforce their rights. Again, this feeds back to the first point I made around some employees being made self-employed because it makes the salon viable, bluntly, because of the unlevel playing field, because of the taxation differential between employees and self-employed. And so this body the single enforcement body is proposed that it allows all workers to be able to come to one central place to say that their rights aren't being protected. Probably, again, if done right, a really powerful, really good thing, because it protects people's rights. Sorry, Tony, I've just seen your message. Yeah, agree. It is really hard to compete with salons using the self-employed model, and it is very difficult, and that's why we await all the detail on this, Tony, because we just don't know how it's going to pan out and whether it will help support the traditional salon model. Let's be clear, there's nothing wrong with self-employment. There's nothing wrong with the aspiration of wanting to be your own boss and to have the flexibility that provides. The problem comes when it is being abused, and the rules are not being followed in terms of paying a fair share of taxation, or whether people are being forced into self-employment or self-employed status when actually they really should still remain on PAYE as employees. Just coming back to the Employment Tribunal claim limit. So currently, if an employed worker has left the business for whatever reason, they have 3 months in most cases to make a claim to an Employment Tribunal, and there are proposals to increase this to 6 months. Again, the detail here is missing because it may not cover all types of dismissal, and it may not cover all potential claims to an Employment Tribunal. But again, it isn't all negative, because there is some evidence that when workers have lost a job, if they haven't got a new job, they might put a speculative Employment Tribunal claim in. However, if they then get 6 months to get a job, maybe they won't put that speculative claim in. We shall have to see. Again, not much detail around this. I think the unfair dismissal changes that are being proposed actually, I think, are some of the most important and could have some of the greatest impact. So the current situation is that if you have an employed person, within the first 2 years, they cannot claim unfair dismissal. Now, in effect, this means that employers have been able to have probationary periods, 3, 6 months, or in some cases longer, and relatively easily and with relatively little risk dismiss that worker. And these proposals are that the right for unfair dismissal would come in on day one. So if they come in as that, this would mean that the first day of employment, all workers have the same rights. So that means if you want to dismiss them, you really need to go through the full disciplinary process, which can take a very long time. As we say here, not sure how this is going to work, because for things like casual workers, if you were to take on somebody to help perhaps with a busy time, are they still going to have the same rights as somebody who's been with you for 18 months, 2 years, 5 years? But there are some big changes here around things like probationary periods and your contracts if you employ people. And so unfair dismissal at this point, as well as all of the others, mean that when we have the detail, most employees' contracts will need to be updated, and all of your recruitment processes and paperwork will need to be updated. We will have a solution to help you with that when that time comes. Again, pay and sickness. This is one of the really big potential changes that are proposed, and where there has been a lot of, in my view, unfounded statements made around how this will impact different employee groups and different ages, like apprentices. So the proposal is that the national living wage is to reflect the real living wage and apply from age 18. Now, the real living wage is higher than the national living wage. So, and then this has an impact on who qualifies for statutory payments like sick pay, like maternity pay, because more people will fall into the qualifying criteria if they're paid more. However, we don't know which groups this will impact, because a lot of the rumour have been around whether this would include apprentices. You know, we all had that 21% increase in apprentice minimum wage back in April, and we have seen a dramatic drop in the number of apprentices since then. You know, there are people wanting to join the industry, but employers can't afford them. And even though the apprentice minimum wage is lower for the first year, it takes 2.5 years for an apprentice to start earning their wages. And so, you know, this is something absolutely that we are lobbying on. Heather, we don't know when these proposals are going to come into force. They are still in the consultation stage. That consultation is likely to start at the end of the summer once they've got some detail around what they're consulting on. This is not going to be, in my view, before 2025. However, you make predictions in politics at your peril, so I may well stand corrected, but I think there is so much detail around all of these points that we've covered so far, and there's more to come, that it will take a long time to push through. Yeah, absolutely. The pension costs completely. Paying somebody more, the employer's contribution increases. There's also been a fair bit of proposal, a bit of chat around equality and strengthening the duty to prevent sexual harassment, protection for women, mandatory reporting of sexual harassment, also mandatory ethnicity disability reporting, and protection from third-party harassment. We don't know the detail of this. However, it's likely to be for larger employers. So, for example, there's also a proposal around gender pay gap around senior staff's wages being declared. It may change, but normally that's for things like 250 plus employees, and so should not impact the regular salons. We'll keep you updated if that changes, because it's not particularly costly, but it is exactly as you say, Heather, it's an awful lot of admin. And so I think that's the bit for me that is a hidden cost to all of this. The pension, you know, it's the admin of reporting different things, the making sure that we follow all the rules if we want to dismiss somebody. It just makes it not fun, stressful, and hard work. And as I say, we have some changes coming which will help you, whatever your employment status, whether that's employee, employer, or self-employed, to help you get through all of this burden. Because, yeah, it's time consuming, and it's not why we all got into the industry, is it? Tony, brilliant point. How can we get all the trade organisations to speak as one, as we all have the same problems? We're trying, Tony. We have an open invitation to all trade organisations within hairdressing to come and join us around the table to lobby with one voice on the areas that we can all agree on. That invitation remains open, and so we hope that everybody can join the British Hair Consortium, and we can all lobby together. Don't worry, we're nearly there. So family friendly. This is quite, if this comes in as proposed, this is potentially quite a burden, quite a hidden cost to employers, because it makes parental leave a day one right. So somebody currently now to take, for example, statutory maternity leave and statutory maternity pay, they need to have been working for you at the 15th qualifying week. Awful phrase, that, isn't it? Largely, they need to be working for you when the child was conceived, in broad terms. However, if it's a day one right, more people will fall into these statutory payments, and it's more cost. But there's some really good things within it also. For example, bereavement leave for all workers, because actually, I think that's something all reputable employers should be offering. We've all had a bereavement at some point in our family, or we all will, and so the support from your employer and workplace is really important. The question around this is, if they're giving self-employed workers a contract, do all of these rights fall in to the self-employed contracts also? We've also within that is the protection from dismissal within 6 months of returning from maternity leave. Again, that's pretty onerous, because it makes it very difficult for you to flex or change your business if things change. If you had some, one or numerous people that you just can't dismiss. So yes, it is complicated, Paul, but we don't know the details. So we will try very hard and make it not complicated, and also we will look pretty hard also to provide you solutions where you've got advice and you've got a go-to place that you can come to with advice and all those sorts of things, to really make it as simple as possible. Lily, yes, we'll talk about apprenticeship wages in a minute. Absolutely. So it continues, flexible working. So I'm sure you know now that employees have a right to submit a flexible working request. You don't have to accept it. And that may change. We don't know. Again, improving redundancy rights practices. We just don't know. All of these things are going to, it's all up in the air. And I think this is where it's important to not panic, not to be stressed, because we just don't know the detail. Colette, did I hear you?
You did. I'm very
Hooray!
sorry, everybody.
Welcome.
Do you know what? I do apologise. I've been sitting here listening on my phone and trying to get a PC going, so I've changed to another one. I do apologise. But I've just been listening to what Gareth's saying. I think that's quite right. I think the key message has to be here. Look, guys, we've got time to influence this, haven't we, Gareth? It's very early stages. There's various consultations that have to come out. So I know this all sounds like a lot of detail and a lot of basically what could be administration and everything else. But this is where we need you. And I heard somebody say earlier, and I think it was Tony, because I was looking at the kind of comments, go if I could jump in for a second, about how we're getting us all to work together. And I think this is the key point. We need you to get all the industry organisations to work with us, and we're working together because if we, it's really important that we get the correct information across, isn't it, Gareth? Now, I don't know if Gareth's already said, but part of the employment changes, and especially on national minimum wage, we've already submitted to the Low Pay Commission. So the Low Pay Commission are the body that actually advise government on wages for various across employment and across other sectors. So I'll hand over back to Gareth then, and I'm here, so I'll be answering questions. Thank you, and apologies again.
Thanks, Colette. So no, I hadn't mentioned the Low Pay Commission, and thank you for bringing that up. I think I would also add, which hopefully gives some reassurance, Lily, you mentioned about apprentice wages, is that we met with the previous government. We met with the first Secretary to the Treasury. So the first Secretary of the Treasury is the third most important minister within the Treasury. Chancellor, Chief Secretary, and the First Secretary. And the First Secretary is the minister responsible for taxation. And we were lobbying at that meeting to say, please don't increase apprentice minimum wage again, because the 21% increase was horrendous and remains horrendous for our sector. Excuse me, our sector. And he said, look, there's no intention of rising it in a big way again. It was felt that the apprentice minimum wage was too low and that it needed to be brought up to be on level with the others, and that any future increases would only be inflationary.
Absolutely, Gareth. I think the other
However, that was a Conservative minister, and he lost his job and his seat, I think. So we don't know what the current government is gonna do. So Paul, yes, lobbying together with other sectors is absolutely something that we are trying to do. If we, because we aren't regulated, bluntly, we aren't able to speak with one voice, and therefore we are easy to ignore. Why are we easy to ignore? Government doesn't even know how many people work in our sector. If they don't know how many people work in our sector, they don't know how many votes they're going to lose. They don't know how much money they're bringing in. And so if we had mandatory regulation, we had more data to show government that our sector's worth X billion pounds a year, it employs X tens of hundreds of thousands of people, and it's a net contributor to the economy, we would have a better voice at that table.
Yeah, and we'd have similar to that, Gareth, as well. I think, to give people an idea what that means. This is why hospitality have that. This is why, with other sectors, the regulator stands in between, the industry and the government, and actually has those kind of discussions for you. We're there to be your buffer. We're there to protect the industry from these kind of curveballs that are coming. I think that's really important to say, Gareth, because I don't think people really understand that. And I think that's really, really important. And one thing I've seen, because I've actually just seen some stuff off the press, Gareth, if I can just say, because some stuff has actually come out today. So obviously, I'll let Gareth carry on, and then we can go through that in a second.
Okay, so Paul, I'm just going to answer your question. Paul's question is: the government know how many salons there are, though? Surely, Gareth.
They only know how many registered.
You'd like to think they would, Paul,
No,
but
don't.
our experience of these meetings is that they don't.
No.
And that we were asked by the civil servants how many salons that there were and how many workers there were, because they didn't know. And when you have that in a meeting with a senior civil servant, you're kind of a bit lost for words, because this is basic information that they should be knowing. And so we, for example, the ONS data, which is kind of the standard information, and the census we all complete, have completely different information on the number of people working in our sector. However, let's just pop back to apprenticeships before we which is generally the end. A lot of change coming to apprentices and apprenticeships, but there, as I've said several times, very, very little detail. Far too early to be making headline grabbing assumptions when we've got no detail. I've mentioned apprentice national minimum wages won't be increasing, but they may. We just don't know. A small point of detail is Skills England is taking over from iFate in terms of the management creation of apprentices, and this is not just in our sector. This is in all. And so, you know, there's a huge amount to come here. We'll keep you up to date. I think there's, you know, a session entirely on apprentices and apprenticeships when we know the detail. But as I say, we don't know the detail, so not much more to say on that one at the moment, I'm afraid. So if you want a copy of the slides, let me have your email address in the chat, please. And I'll get you the slides and a copy of the recording afterwards. However, it's now an opportunity for us to try and answer your questions and to you know, for you guys to say this is what is pressing for you. And I'm delighted at this point that Colette's is with us. I'm also going to pop a poll up in the chat as well, because it's got a couple of, I hope, a couple of really useful, couple of interesting questions within it. So Paul, really interesting question. I know Nigel Farage knows a lot about illegal salons.
So do we.
Yeah. I think Nigel Farage thinks he knows a lot about a lot. But the issue around illegal salons, and you know, primarily these, but not exclusively, these are barber shops. They're often described in the media as Turkish barbers. Again, they're not. Eastern European, Syrian, so forth. And they're very clearly, and we have very clear evidence that they are fronts for money laundering, for prostitution, for many, many bad things. And that really the only way to stop them would be for there to be a register so that we know where these shops are opening. I think one of the key things that would help things like that is when a press release comes out from wherever saying that the number of barber shops has increased and there's growth in our sector. It's hugely unhelpful, because when the doors on a high street have been counted, yeah, within barbershops, that's true. But actually, how many of those are legitimate businesses? We just don't know, because no information exists about what goes on behind the front door. No. And so, picking up on Tony's point, we all need to come together. We all need to lobby together. We all need to call out claims and data that is not accurate and is not helping our sector. Because if we don't, bluntly, we haven't got much of a sector to look forward to.
No, we haven't. And I think you're quite right there, Gareth. I can jump in and just answer a question that Paul's asked. I think this is really important, especially because obviously he's asked a question, do the government have any idea how much revenue has been lost on VAT alone from disguised employment? Perhaps if they were aware of the numbers, they'd take notice. Well, they have, Paul, actually, and they do know. They don't necessarily know, as Gareth just said. I mean, the key thing is here, we've got to remember something. And I'm going to say, I feel very strongly about this, because the fact that we don't have luxury of regulation and a central register means that, as Gareth said, government don't know who's trading and where. So it does rely on anybody in a shop or anything else to actually register as a legitimate business. And like Gareth said, you know, with our sector saying it's got growth and various other messages that are going out in the media, which we all know is not true, we're having to fight that much harder with government to say, no, actually, we may look like we've got more barbershops, or we may look like we've got more salons, but actually, what's going on behind there is not actually a true reflection of the state of the industry. Now, coming back to your question, Paul, do they know? They do. Well, they don't know specifically who's trading where, but what they do know, and you've heard it all in the general election, you've probably heard it a lot before the general election when they talked about the 6.2 million tax avoidance that they wanted to recover. And this is why we have to unite and we have to get together. And this is why we're here this evening. Because actually they identified a gap to the Treasury of 6.2 billion. And you've probably heard all the parties say that before the general election. More importantly, they've identified that 13% of that 6.2 billion hidden economy belongs to hairdressing. So this is why we have to get united, and this is why we have to make sure that any information that's going out there in the media is firstly correct. And this is why we won't put anything out if it's too early. We won't put anything out that's not factual. We will only put things out when we have it confirmed from government, and that is clear. You know, it's very difficult to make sweeping statements when you haven't got the facts. To give you an idea on the disguised employment, we're waiting for a consultation from government. Some consultations have come out today, but they've looked at the banking sector first as well. So we've had sight of the Irish consultation, and there's a lot of information in there about looking at disguised employment and how it's identified, how it's dealt with, and everything else. So they are aware. The difficulty is here, and if I can say this, there's a lot of people in our industry who probably aren't aware they're running a disguised employment model. They're probably not aware that they're actually disguised employees. So this is where, as the regulator, it's for us to actually stand and actually say, look, you know, we're here to protect you. We have to have these conversations with government. And I think Gareth's right. If we don't have a united voice, if you like, then, you know, our industry is not going to get what it needs. If you look at hospitality, if you look at all of the other sectors, they all have one body talking for them. They all have a regulator standing there. None of them work in isolation. They all go with one meeting, one objective, and they actually go into government with that. Somebody asked earlier about our government listening. Well, how do government listen when so many people are saying different things? It's impossible for them to take it in. So we want you to actually get behind this so that we can stand as your regulator. And when I say regulator, please just, you know, don't think that word's a scary word, because to me, regulation's protection. We don't want to tie our industry up in red tape. We're not there to tell you how to trade. We are there to stand between you and governments when policies like this come in, and policies that come in that are very, shall we say, unpalatable and can cause your business a lot of stress and you a lot of stress. We're the ones who need to negotiate that for you, because nobody else can. So I think that's really important to say, though, Gareth, because so the ones that came out today was from HMRC. It came out and they're talking about they were talking about some key changes and the finance bill that's going through, and the changes that are going to secondary legislation beginning of October. So what this means, what Gareth said earlier, said it's not happening overnight. We've got a budget planned for the 30th of October. Okay, I will say, if Gareth will allow me, that we have actually met the Chancellor, the current Chancellor. I've met them. So we do know the plans. They are listening to our industry. They're very conscious of our industry. But what they have told us categorically is you must come to us as one. I think that's fair to say. So what we're expecting now is a consultation to come out on employment status, where I don't know if Gareth mentioned earlier, but we mentioned about the worker status being combined with employed, which will have a massive impact on our industry. So that's got to go through a consultation process. So we need to be able to go to government at that point and say, right, now we've got valid data. As Gareth said, and it's actually been mentioned in the government papers today, Gareth, this evening, where they said that ONS data is only a reiteration of 12 months ago, and it's adjusted all the time, so it's a moving target. So it's not reliable enough for us to actually base fiscal policy on. So they're looking to sectors to actually provide their own data. That's why it's important. So when we ask you to do a poll or do a survey, it's really important that you guys fill that in. I know it can be really, I know it can be really, you just get fed up of seeing surveys. But unless you guys give us the data, we can't go to government. And what we can't do is have data that doesn't mean anything. One thing I will say from my background and from working with data for many years is if you go into government with data that's basically 87% of 12 people said they wanted something, that's not data. That's not a sample. That's opinion. That's not fact. So, we need to make sure that we get the data. So we want to know your business your business, how your business is legally, set up. We want to know what your employment status is or what you believe it is, so that we can get you into, a position where we've got the correct data to go to government and say, look, this is going to affect this many people. This is what we need. This is, what's going to happen with national minimum wage, should you raise it or do anything with apprentices, which has not been confirmed yet. And considering the fact that we've got a skills, legislation, the skills agency coming in, and we've got that going through, plus another agency that's going to be working on this who haven't even been formed yet, it's far too early to make assumptions. Now is not the time to worry. Now is not the time to panic. Now is the time to get prepared.
Yeah, I agree with that, Claire. And just picking up on your thing about data. So through the British Hair Consortium, we have been collecting proper data, which is looking at all areas of the industry, so that we've got some really good information to go to government with. And that is at thehairsurvey.co.uk. Please, could you go on there, complete the survey. Please ask your staff, anybody else working in the sector, to complete the survey, because we need to, we absolutely need to get as many responses as we can, because then we go to government with good information that is not, 7 out of 10 cats prefer whiskers, 11 cats were asked.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is the problem. So Paul, I agree, the whole problem with this is one's an employer and the other is a property business renting space.
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And the issue is when that property business still thinks that they are a hairdresser running a salon under their own name, under their own control, and that makes a massive difference. Lily, yes, absolutely, it does make it easier for us if businesses register with the Hair Council. Please, we now have a new system where you can come on to the Hair Council website and you can register all of your staff. And that's a new development in the last month. And so that means that we absolutely get as many workers, whatever your status, as I like to reiterate, self-employment is awesome. It provides control. It provides you an amazing future. And, the freelancers and the Freelance Hairdressers Association, led by Sheila, is an awesome group of people. The issue is when it's not being done within the boundaries and legitimately, and it then provides a non-level playing field for those who are doing things correctly.
Go on, Gavin, sorry.
Sorry. So no, Scott, I'm afraid it's not free. It's £70 a year. And Paul, I'll check. I did see your name on a certificate. So I think you did successfully join.
Gareth, if you think about it this way, I've always, if I could just come back to this, I'm quite proud to have my state registration certificate behind me. And the reason I'm proud of it is because if I always use this thing, and it doesn't get too old, but if you look at gas safe engineers and you look at our industry, you look at how many people are trading in our industry who haven't actually put the years of effort and training that you have, they haven't qualified, that haven't worked their entire lives, cutting hair and everything else, they're just literally trading in our sector. And there's a lot of them, isn't there, Gareth? And this is what we want to protect your income against, okay? Because these guys are actually undercutting your income. They are depressing pricing. So when you actually look at this, if you look at gas safe engineers, the day they actually all registered to prove their worth to the general public, their hourly rate went from £60 to £200 overnight. So I'm just looking what somebody's saying. They are quite funny comments. But anyway, so what I'm saying is, this is about raising your professional status. This is about elevating you. This is about saying you've got that license. And it's really important that you get behind this, because unless we go to government and say our industry actually wants to be recognised as professionally skilled trade, we are professionals. We run professional businesses. We are hairdressers and we know what we're doing. The only way you do that is to prove to them en masse to create one voice, and the way you do that is to actually get behind legislation. The more that get behind legislation, the more basically, you're going to give us to actually go and stand and fight in your corner. It worked for dentists, it's worked for doctors, it's even worked for tattooists, it's worked for hospitality. Look at all the help hospitality got during COVID. We don't want to be disregarded by government because they don't think we take our own industry seriously. And I think that's the key thing. If people want to be recognised as professionals and get behind it.
Yeah, totally. And Nikki, to answer your question, there is a different lower rate if you're bringing on multiple people, because we need to reflect the fact that we don't want to lumber you with a huge cost, and we try and make this as cheap as low cost as it possibly is. And Scott, I wish we could do it for free. In order for us to do that, we would need our sponsors to take up the difference, because there are costs that we cannot avoid in order to do the work that we do, and that doesn't include ginormous, or in fact any salaries. That is all. It's all about having enough money to be able to lobby effectively. And thank you, Tony. Yeah, registered all your staff, and yeah, I'm pleased, worth every penny. I think it really proves professional status. It really proves that we don't use the word hairdresser, we use the word hair pro, because actually that's what it is. That's what we do, and we need a bit more respect.
I think somebody's just said here, and I think it's a really good point, Gareth, as well, because all the things we're discussing this evening and all the things we're going to be discussing with you in the future, because we will be bringing you more information on all these areas once we get the information from government. But Scott's put, until the public understand that value, the salons may not. And you're quite right, Scott, but this is up to us to tell the public. If you go into the public, or you ask any of your clients, and I've done this plenty of times in my salon, they will be shocked that we're not regulated. They do not believe we're not regulated. They believe everybody's qualified, everybody's got a standard, everybody's works to, professional standard. They don't understand, but that's for us to educate them. And I think how we educate them is we elevate ourselves.
Totally. And Toby, thank you for raising that. And I'll just read Toby's comment, which is, one of the most important things for all to know is that we are saying to government that they must understand the unique nature of our business and the tax contribution we make before they bring in any of these new rules. And that is 100% right. We want to make sure we're representing the industry as the regulator, and as a large group with the British Hairdressing Consortium, we're representing the impact, positive or negative, that these changes are making. Exactly as Toby says, otherwise, if they don't listen, we are going to be going to them and saying, look, hairdressers used to be the largest tenant on the high street, but they've all closed down. And all of those people that used to come and have a really fulfilling creative career, well, they've not got a job now. And so, that's the brass tacks of what we need to do here. That's why we need to make sure we're lobbying. If you have got something further you want to say, I'm sorry that poll didn't work. Technology is not my friend this evening. It must be perhaps Microsoft doesn't like the heat. But if you've got something you want to say, please contact me directly. My email address is in the thread, but it's Gareth Penn, PENN, @haircouncil.org.uk. And I will email everybody who's given me their email address in the chat with a copy of the slides, with a link to the recording. And you've got my details then, please let me know the impact. Please let me know how your business is going, whatever your status. We really want to be lobbying in the best way. Paul, interesting question. How much does it cost to get our industry regulated? I think that is at the moment a question that's pretty much impossible to answer, because we need to get the law changed in order for that to come in. And when you think about some of the detail around the regulation, actually it's not too difficult for us to put in. There's a lot of people in our sector who've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that would help that process through. And exactly as Colette says, regulation is not about a barrier to entry. It's not about someone standing in the corner with a stick.
No.
It's about support. It's about protecting the consumer, and it's about respect. And so, absolutely, it wouldn't be that costly. Paul, no, it wouldn't be £70 a head for your 55 staff. Absolutely not. If you want to just drop me an email, I will do you a deal. We don't publish pricing on the internet for 55 staff because it's just, depends on the size and the scale and so forth. So if you want to drop me an email, we'll come up with something that's affordable and that works for you and for us. Tony, who would enforce a breach of regulations? Very good question. We need to be clear that within a mandatory register, there is a process that needs to be followed should somebody breach those regulations and, for example, trade illegally or trade perhaps without insurance or not follow recognized practice to keep a consumer safe. And for example, I mean by that color testing. And so that would all be part of mandatory regulation. That process, there has to be things like, a full investigation. There has to be proper hearings done correctly. There has to be the right of appeal, because you can't knee-jerk remove somebody's trade. That would not be right, and that is absolutely not the intention.
No.
And so, or colouring children's hair, Tony.
Yes,
totally
absolutely.
agree. Totally
absolutely.
Agree. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Please share the survey. Please share regulation. Please tell people about this. And I think probably that's us out of time, Colette.
It is, and I only joined halfway through, so I do apologise. But I think the other thing to say is, just on the back of that, Gareth, as well, is we will keep you updated. Okay, so just remember there's no information out yet on all these areas, and as soon as there are, this is the beauty of having somebody like the Hair and Barber Council, who's the regulator. You know where to go for factual information, because there's a lot of information out there that's complete hearsay. So we will give you facts. So if you don't see anything from us, it's not factual.
I think that's exactly right, Colette. We will let you know the facts when we know them. Please don't panic. Please don't be stressed about things that you read that are not true.
And fill in the survey and help us get this information.
Fill in the survey, yes.
Help us to help you.
Well, thank you, Colette, very much. So we'll try harder to get the tech to work next time, and thank you guys, all of you, for coming. Share the recording, share the slides, and we'll let you know when we have our next webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Gareth.